Mike Judge's 1999 film Office Space is a cult classic that is still as relevant and popular today in 2025 as it was at the time of its release, as part of the generation of people working in an office who face the same issues that Peter does through the first half of the film. A lot of this film is very relatable, particularly Peter dealing with his boss, his 8 different bosses, the criticism he gets for his TPS reports, and the seeming lack of ability for him to do anything about it. That is, of course, until the consultants come in, and after being hypnotized, Peter has no fears about losing his job. He's not burdened with the usual dread that office workers have been indoctrinated with, and he's free to speak his mind. And he finds that in doing so, he gains the respect of the consultants because he's able to accurately describe the systems and how the office really works, which perks the ears of the consultants. Peter is effectively transcending to sociopath status, as referenced in the Gervais Principle, which regards office workers as either sociopaths who run the office from the top. They understand how all the systems work, the exploitation of workers, and control, getting people to do things for the benefit of them and for the company. Like when Lumberg, Peter's boss, asked him to work on Saturday and Sunday, Peter, who's downtrodden at that stage in the movie, thinks that he has to do it. And it's only through his hypnosis that relieves him of his fear that prevents him from doing so. And in doing so, realizes there are no consequences. The second one is the clueless, who are the middle management, who get promoted a little bit of the way up the food chain. So they get some extra money, but these people will typically break their backs for the company. They'll work extra hours and make sure all the losers down the bottom are kept in line. In Office Space, Lumberg could be considered the clueless because he's in the middle management position and he's keeping Peter and his colleagues, the losers, down and unable to rise. What Peter experiences through the consultants is a rare event where he is identified as a future sociopath. He's able to speak about his work, his colleagues, and the system they all operate within with a completely objective view, removing his own emotion from the analysis, which is something that the consultants are impressed with and want to know more. And while the scene later is played for laughs, there is a lot of truth in it, where the consultants say Peter's a straight shooter with upper management written all over him, who hasn't been challenged enough. The life of most losers is to stay down at the loser level, but Peter has displayed that in this moment, this interview in the still image with the Bobs, that he is capable of more. Now, a lot of losers never have this change in thought that Peter does, and they will never be capable of displaying this knowledge. But most of the losers, even if they did have this awareness, would be too afraid of speaking up and sharing it, of fear of losing their jobs, their positions they have, when in reality the company wants you in that loser position because it actually benefits them. So the lesson here from this first half is that Peter becomes unburdened by his fear, unburdened by his passivity that enabled him to bow to Lumberg's requests. Lumberg is not an intimidating man, but he dominates Peter in the first 20 or 30 minutes of the movie. But Peter, realizing that he doesn't need to be afraid, then dominates Lumbergh by parking in his car spot, walking away from conversations with him. He's no longer fearing him, and the illusion of Lumbergh's power goes away. Really, that whole sequence of events of Peter being unconfident and afraid to having this transcendence and openness with the consultants, an ability to articulately share his views on the organization and his role within it, enables him to get this promotion, and potentially Lumbergh is out the door. We don't see that in the film, but the Bobs begin to grill Lumbergh at the end of the scene where they're discussing Peter and some of the other employees. That in itself is the beauty of Office Space. That is why people remember it as a great film. And that's the lesson that you should take from it, that being unafraid of the consequences of your words and your honesty, if your analysis is correct, is how you can potentially get ahead. Yes, it could have gone bad for Peter, but it didn't. And if you're able to share your thoughts, you're better off doing so, because you could be in a situation where the right person hears it and they're able to help you accelerate forward in your career. Unfortunately, when you actually watch this full film, the rest of the film doesn't add up to the highs that this early series of events has. There's a bit of a conflicting message, and by the end of the film, it's almost like the film's trying to convince you that you shouldn't do what Peter does, even though you see him succeed. The film takes a moral stance against Peter's actions, even though he's cracked the code. So after Peter's sort of figured this out and he's got this promotion, so he's going to get paid more money. That is a solution in itself. Like, Peter has already won in a sense, because he's got his promotion. But then the film explores further solutions to this issue of not wanting to work in an office, like these get out, retire early plans. So he looks into a scam with Michael and Samir, which Peter is not aware of how the software works, but he shows the leadership to engineer the scam. It's Michael who is actually the one who knows how to do the scam with the virus that takes a certain percentage of the decimal points of each transaction and puts it into an account. But Michael is unable to see through the matrix the way Peter does. When they have their meeting with the Bobs, Michael is very smug and he thinks Peter is getting fired, not him, and that he doesn't need to do this scam. He has this ability to run this scam that could potentially make him hundreds of thousands of dollars, but because he has a quote good job, he wouldn't do it, which is somewhat reasonable, but it's a little crazy for Michael to think he's above it, because then when Peter informs him that he's the one who's potentially going to get fired, Michael has a very woe for me, and they're sitting at the bar, and Michael says, "How could they do this to me? I've, worked here through my 20s and got nothing for it." So he's even admitting that despite the job that he considers a good job, after you get paid and the expenses that get paid out in your life with cost of living and housing and whatever else Michael's paying, that he's basically just spent his 20s and got nothing out of it, which is the position that a lot of us find ourselves in now, because housing and cost of living has gone up. So even compared to 1999, we have to be more diligent with how we save, and that is to get far less than what you could have got in 1999 for the same level of effort and financial literacy. So Peter is able to lead Michael and Samir to running the scam, and it is quite a funny scene. They do it. They passing the floppy disk back and forth. They've created this plan, and they successfully do it. And Peter says, "Well, that was easier than I thought it would be." Then the issue comes up that the Michael has put a decimal in the wrong place in his coding, which is a very stupid mistake to make, and they've stolen $300,000 overnight, which is, to their opinion, too much. Like, they're going to get caught straight away, which you think possibly they would, but who knows, with the amount of money Initech was moving. And they immediately freak out. They don't consider withdrawing the money and fleeing. They just start making plans for going to prison, even though that process would take a very long time. And there's this shaming that occurs in the film that it was such a stupid idea. Peter's blue collar neighbor doesn't want to hang out with him anymore because he doesn't want him to mess his life up as well. And then, even though Peter has said, "We don't speak about this to anyone, no wives, no girlfriends," he then tells his girlfriend, played by Jennifer Aniston, and Jennifer Aniston in this film is a chain restaurant waitress, and she questions the morality of his actions, that he's stealing, which is correct. But the whole first half of this film is exploring how companies are inherently immoral in the first place, and that you may have to act immorally to succeed in them, and pointing out the absurdity of Peter's behavior. Well, not the absurdity, but that he is going along with what the company wants, and then all of a sudden he changes his attitude to this sociopathic transparency, and that enables him to rise up. So it's accurately exploring these office space and company dynamics. But then Peter he defers to Jennifer Aniston's character, who is a waitress who has no prospects of getting out of her situation. And then this culminates with Jennifer Aniston delivering this short speech in the car park that everyone hates their job and that we just need to get on with it. And that is treated with seriousness. Like, yeah, don't do what Peter did, which is orchestrate a plan to make $300,000 overnight and get out early. Jennifer Aniston, Jennifer Aniston's character, who has achieved nothing, it just says, well, everyone hates their jobs, so that's what we have to do. Like, the movie regresses in its scope so greatly, and as a viewer, it's very jarring to see it like that. Like, Peter is going through this transcendence. He should be focused on how he's going to set himself up. He's focused on his mission. He's going to make this money through his promotion and get this extra money on the side. And then he listens to the waitress as if that's what he should be doing. And the movie basically says, yeah, that's what he should do. The chemistry between him and Jennifer Aniston is, I find, really poor throughout the whole movie. In fact, her character in general is very jarring. It almost feels like she does that as an actor. She doesn't comprehend the movie she's in. Like, some of her lines feel very stilted, or she's a bit of a dominating presence, which, it's just strange. Like, she's obviously very good looking, but it's strange that Peter picks her out and then chooses to pursue her when the whole turmoil he's going through is that his career, his life is a joke, and then he puts all his eggs in the Jennifer Aniston basket when he should be working out how he's going to become a millionaire and retire. He gets completely off track, and that's part of, I guess, the second half of this film not matching the first half. The other solution, which is explored very briefly at the end, is when Peter joins his neighbor in a blue collar job, and he seems happy, but it's a momentary happiness of just being out in the sun. When after the fire that occurs at Innertech, it seems like, yes, they got away with what they did by taking the money out, but they didn't really explore, were they going to keep that money? So, what was their next move going to be? It was just, well, I'm just going to work in labor now, which, sure, there's some perks of that over an office job, but not enough for the level of transcendence Peter was going through, which for me makes a very weak ending. And I think Peter's regression into feeling guilt, and he initially doesn't, but it's the words of Jennifer Aniston and his colleagues and his neighbor that make him back down from what he was doing. And it's probably the same thing that Peter had before when Lumbergh was bullying him into doing things. It's this passiveness that enables companies to dominate their workers, or the losers in the organization, because they just bombard them with things like the Hawaiian shirt Fridays, the birthday cake in the office, the condescension of, that'd be great, what's happening, that all the bosses are always saying. And that condescension then comes through the other characters like Jennifer Aniston and his colleagues. They have been indoctrinated with that so much that then they get to Peter, and even though Peter's very headstrong, he eventually succumbs to it again and decides that he can't do these things. Even though he's proven himself to be capable to get a promotion, to run this scam, he backs down. And the message of the film is almost that if you don't like your job, do not try and get out. Do not. I mean, I'm not saying that we should be stealing from the companies we work for, but it's very against the get rich quick scheme. And yeah, you can't only be chasing the get rich quick scheme, but Peter also displayed that he was capable of climbing the corporate ladder, which is a very rare feat. But he backed down from that and became a blue collar worker. And maybe this is a bit true to life. Maybe there are people who have these moments of opportunity and then they can't realize it, they can't grab it, and then they regress, or they don't recognize their own skills that they have, and they end up becoming like the extreme cases that we see in this film. Tom, who wants to end things, he wants to end his life, and then is hit in a car accident and gets a large payout that means he never has to work again. But he's been in his office job for 30 years, and his life, while it's not over, he's definitely passed over some of those boundaries of the spiritual death. And he says to Peter, if you hold it in there long enough, good things can happen. But it's played as a joke but it's too late. And you need to do these things while you still have time, while you can still make a difference. And the extreme example in the film is Milton, the ultimate passive character who can't even get through a single conversation without being beaten or had some of his rights taken away or his position eroded by Lumbergh. And when you look at these extremes, it shows what you can't act like. And while Peter, he starts off passive, he then gets a fire lit under him and he's taking over the world. But then he allows himself to be brought back down to earth by his passive friends and colleagues, and ultimately makes no progress by the end of the film. So, Office Space, an interesting film, a lot to learn from it, but ultimately a confusing message. Thanks for listening.